Story 1. This is my first time posting, so if I make any mistakes, please let me know and be gentle. I'm also on my mobile, so the formatting might be a bit off. I'm a busy mom, so I might not be able to edit this in a timely manner. Apologies in advance. Context: this is a story about a time when I had just had enough of people for the day, and things got really messy. For work, I had to dress in upscale business attire, which included some outdated ideas on women's wear, like the requirement to wear heels and nylons. I would often do my shopping or errands on my way home from work. This happened years ago, so I won't remember everything exactly, but I'll recount it to the best of my ability. Story: that day had been particularly long due to my difficult boss. While I was shopping, 2 people had already mistaken me for a store employee and asked for help. It was an upscale mall, and I was dressed similarly to the store managers. The first 2 people were polite and apologized for the honest mistake, and I was cheerful about it because they were so nice. But then there was the encounter with the third person in under 15 minutes. I was walking away from the shoe section to the ladies' lingerie area, shopping for nylons, when I heard the dreaded "excuse me." Entitled person, excuse me. I knew exactly what was happening and what that tone meant. I had a good idea of what kind of person would bark so rudely and loudly, especially in a high-end department store. I was completely done with personal interactions for the day, especially one that could be draining. So, of course, I ignored the entitled person, pretending I didn't hear her. Entitled person, stridently and much louder, moving closer, excuse me. I was already on edge because she was too close, and now I was whining in my head. I sighed audibly, on purpose, and turned around. Yes. Entitled person, you're the manager. Where is specific item? I don't remember what she was looking for exactly, and to be honest, I didn't care. Me. I don't know, ma'am. She cut me off before I could finish with, I don't work here. Entitled person, well, you should. I'm a frequent and loyal customer, so. She actually shooed me away, all indignant, wanting me to find out as soon as possible. I just blinked at her. Entitled person, well, go find out already, she shouted directly in my face, with spittle to boot. Me. Ma'am, I don't work here, I said with a dead-eyed expression. I didn't even care enough to explain further. Entitled person, well, I never. You are the rudest employee I've ever encountered. Go get your boss. I was frustrated and no longer cared because she had shooed and snapped her fingers at me. I'm not an employee, so I'm not going to do anything but continue my own shopping. You should be ashamed of yourself for your inexcusable behavior. Entitled person, confused but persistent. Sure, you aren't, she said sarcastically. Just go find out. I'm running late, and I need specific item. Me. Ma'am, I still don't work here. I turned and walked away. The employees at this store would never walk away from a shopper or be rude. Not ever. I could hear her getting even more aggravated as I left, but I didn't care. She was being unreasonable. As I was looking at the display of nylons in the lingerie section, trying to find the correct ones, which took a few minutes because they weren't plentiful and I needed toeless ones for open-toed pumps, I heard more screeching. Entitled person, there she is, she shouted, dragging an employee behind her, powered by the sheer force of her displeasure. I didn't turn around, knowing this was going to get ugly given the mood I was now in. Employee, looking confused and very worried, I think there's been a. Entitled person, I want that manager's name and her boss now. She will be fired immediately. And give me corporate's number. This is disgraceful. I slowly turned around. I should warn that while I'm normally very tolerant and love to help especially older people who need it, I greatly dislike ignorant or entitled behavior, and I have a temper. The entitled person stepped into my space again, and I lost my patience, yelling right in her face. I hate that for good reason. Me. Ma'am, I said, very obviously sarcastic. For the last time. I do not work here. I stepped away and turned around again, trying to calm myself and avoid a catastrophe. The store was silent, with only the classical music in the background. I was desperately trying to find the nylons quickly so I could grab them and leave as soon as possible, struggling to control my temper. I saw the ones I needed and grabbed all they had, around 5 pairs, not even checking if they were the correct sizes. That's when everything went wrong. The entitled person grabbed my arm, pinching it hard as her hand slipped on my silk blouse. I bruise easily, so it ended up being a huge bruise later. She grabbed me so hard that she pulled the seam on the sleeve. I think I still have the blouse in the back of my closet, but I never wore it again, so I'm not positive. What the entitled person didn't know, which escalated the situation drastically, was that I have extreme post-traumatic stress disorder from a previous traumatic experience. Any grabbing of my arms from behind triggers a severe and often violent reaction. I instantly had a flashback. I'm sorry. This is hard for me to recount, as even now, I shake when thinking about it or the attack. My husband told me what happened next, as he later watched the security tapes. I dropped my items, jerked my arm away, backed into a corner as best I could, and started screaming in panic. Me. No, don't touch me. I slid down the wall, covering my ears, repeating, no, no, no. The entitled person made the mistake of moving closer again in an aggressive manner. I remember some of this part. I looked up into her face and went straight into fight mode, standing up abruptly and getting right into her face, screaming aggressively. Me. No, you don't get to hurt me. I wasn't entirely present, but I knew something was off, as there were no men nearby. This was a huge stroke of luck because any men near me at that moment would have triggered a more severe reaction. I was still in an aggressive stance but started saying things like, just leave me alone, go away, and more, no, no, no. The entitled person backed up, likely thinking I was some crazy person, and she would have been correct at that moment. Somehow, the employee realized I wasn't entirely present and was traumatized. My pupils were probably dilated, and with the automatic sobbing, my mascara had likely streaked down my cheeks. My husband said I looked haunted when he picked me up later, as I was too distraught to drive home. The employee calmed me down a little as I noticed I wasn't being attacked at that moment. Then security arrived, and I was still sobbing, shaking, and in the throes of a panic attack from the flashback and adrenaline. The problem was that all the security officers were male, which sent me back into the flashback, screaming and freaking out violently. I know they took the entitled person away at some point, and I hazily remember the employee sitting on the floor nearby, but not too close. She was talking to me in soothing tones, but I don't remember what was said. For all I know, she could have been speaking in an alien language. I wouldn't let anyone else near me. I was too hysterical, crying, and starting to realize, with relief, that it was just a flashback. I became more embarrassed and horrified. The employee got me to hand over my phone to call my emergency contact, my husband. He later told me that he explained what likely happened and asked them to put him on speaker. He began his "you are safe" routine and told me he was on his way. That's what really helped me start to come out of the episode enough to let them assist me, though at a distance. We all ended up in the back offices as they called emergency medical technicians because I was in shock. I was pale, even more so than my usual pale, and almost fainted. I took my medication from my purse and waited as the EMTs arrived to do their job. The police officer who was with me was a war veteran and knew exactly what was going on, how not to set me off, what to ask, etc. The entitled person was in a different area, still going on about the psychotic employee who attacked her and making all sorts of threats. When my husband arrived, he heard her ranting and told the police that I would press charges on anyone who grabbed me and treated me like that. It turned out that another officer, who was with the entitled person, was a distant cousin of my husband. They talked outside the room, and I guess the entitled person overheard that he was my husband. She tried to blame my husband for my PTSD, saying he must have abused me. My husband quickly corrected her by laying down the facts, explaining why I freaked out, what happened to me, that I was a minor at the time, and that it was long before we met. He also told her off before leaving. The information shut her up temporarily, but it didn't stop her completely. My husband came in to comfort me, and I held on to him. The police finally asked, once I was calm enough, if I wanted to press charges, and I did. They had already reviewed the security footage by that point, so they only needed me to confirm what happened and explain why I reacted the way I did. The entitled person was told she was being arrested, and she started screaming again. The store manager said he would be banning her indefinitely for her behavior. At some point, the entitled person's child, a teenage girl, showed up frantically looking for her mom. Mall security had escorted her, and she was making quite a scene. I felt bad for the girl and saw her as she waited for her dad with security when we were escorted out into the public part of the store. The entitled person kept insisting she was innocent and that it was all a misunderstanding, threatening me for doing this to her, all the way until the court date, supposedly. I was really stressed, thinking I would have to testify, but a few months later, the prosecutor's office called to inform me that she was taking a deal. After she saw the CCTV footage and the photographic proof of the ripped shirt and the progression of the huge bruise she gave me, she realized she would lose the case. Since it was her first offense, she was offered a program that included intensive personal and group therapy, anger management, support groups, community service, and other related activities. If she completed the program, her record would be wiped clean. She took the deal, which included pleading guilty in court in front of the judge. So, I didn't have to testify about the assault in open court, for which I was very grateful. One last bit of justice happened, though. Her work found out about the incident, and due to a clause in her contract, they fired her immediately. I found out about that from the prosecutor as well. I haven't heard about her since and haven't bothered to check up on her because she did her sentence, and she's not important. By the way, I still hate hosiery. And this wasn't the only time someone grabbed me in public, causing me to freak out. The most recent incident was last summer. Also, sorry this is so very long. I tried to trim it down without removing too much of the necessary information. For those who are concerned, I still go to therapy, support groups, etc., and have done so since the assault happened 20 years ago. You don't fully get over something like this, but I'm managing pretty well for the most part. Edit. This happened in the greater Phoenix metro area over a dozen years ago, and I'm doing much better now, for those who are concerned. I could get a service dog for crowding, but they are expensive, and insurance doesn't typically cover them unless they're for the visually impaired. I've had a lot of time to recover, so the need isn't as great as it once was to justify the cost. Plus, I'm slightly allergic to dogs. I use symbols to censor certain words mainly for my own well-being, to avoid triggering other survivors or having the post removed until reviewed. I'm keeping it that way for those who read in environments where those words would be jarring, and for all the survivors like me who might be triggered by them. Writing this was emotionally challenging, and just putting it into text was intense enough. I didn't need to add to that. However, this has been cathartic. Story 2. I worked in bars and restaurants for years. During that time, I developed too many pet peeves to count and left the industry with a huge chip on my shoulder and enough trauma that I still have server nightmares years later. I miss liking humans. This is the story of how I served a table very, very badly because they were incredibly difficult to deal with, and because I didn't actually work there. Despite no longer working as a server, I guess I still look like one. I went through a phase where I only owned one pair of black Converse sneakers, 2 pairs of black jeans, and 7 black t-shirts. I called it my Batman wardrobe. It made getting dressed in the morning very easy, but made walking through a restaurant very difficult. With this outfit in mind, I will absolutely concede that in some restaurant settings, I might have been bringing this on myself. But as common as this outfit is among service staff, it certainly isn't what most servers in most restaurants wear. It's also a very normal outfit to see on the street. Most of the time, if I'm just trying to walk to the bathroom and someone at a table tries to order from me, I'll quickly let them know I don't work there. But one time, I'm tempted to try and justify this by outlining the long list of poor behavior I had already witnessed from this table. To save time, I'll just assure you that this table of 6 absolutely knew who their server was and had absolutely been treating her poorly. They were one of those groups where the first guy orders his drink, and by the time the other 5 finally tell the server their orders, the first guy is already complaining that his drink is taking too long when the server hasn't even left the table. Yes, this actually happens a lot. While returning to my table from the bathroom, one of these individuals stopped me with, "Hey, get me an unpleasant drink." I cheerfully replied, "Sure," and proceeded toward my table. Quickly, his rude girlfriend piped up with a whiny, "And I want another of these," gesturing toward some pink concoction in a cup, because of course, that's her taste in beverages. I decided to stick around and let the whole table place orders with me before returning to my table, waiting for them to notice me sitting there with my friends. I didn't think this would go on for long. I was seated in plain sight about 2 tables away. They didn't notice. Their server was back at their table within moments, and they promptly ordered their drinks again since they were definitely the type to double order items from different staff members. So, my prank went unnoticed. Later, I visited the bartender, had a brief chat, and grabbed a couple of drinks. I was walking back to my table with 2 drinks in hand. "Is that mine?" a voice asked as a hand reached out to snatch one. "Nope," I replied and carried on. My actions had the potential to make life harder for the staff, and I'd feel bad about it if I wasn't friends with all of them and if they hadn't been in on it. This table was so badly behaved and determined to have a bad time from the moment they arrived. They were really a lost cause. Any attempt to clear things up for them wouldn't have been worth missing out on the entertainment of messing with them. So, I started looking for excuses to innocently walk past their table. I took a few more bathroom visits than I really needed and visited my friend at the bar a couple more times. I never initiated contact with these clowns, but if they took the bait, I'd take the order. They were becoming increasingly agitated and rude with each encounter. They told me how bad I was at my job, and I just cheerfully corrected them. No, I'm actually really good at my job. They were more infuriated by how unfazed I was by their behavior than by the several drink orders I failed to bring them. Remember, my friends and I were seated in plain sight just a few feet away, drinking and laughing all night. Eventually, they drank 3 rounds, despite having ordered about 9, and decided to leave. Naturally, when their bill arrived, they tried to contest it, arguing, "We didn't actually get most of the drinks we ordered, so they shouldn't be on the bill." The manager informed them that the bill only represented the drinks they did receive. They tried to argue the point, and I just couldn't stand to watch my prank escalate too far, so I spoke up. "Your bill represents the drinks you ordered from your server." I didn't even have to say it loudly since I was seated so close to them. They all turned to look at me, and I wanted to say they realized what was going on, but that's giving them too much credit since one of them immediately threatened to call my boss. I offered them my boss's phone number and dared him to try and get a jeweler to fire their assistant for being bad at table service. He then accused me of putting items on his bill that shouldn't be there. You know, with the access card I used to log into the restaurant's point of sale system where I'm a customer. He still hadn't figured it out. Edit, don't worry. Those people wouldn't have tipped well anyway, and my table more than made up for it.